95.3 HLF, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome to the 95.3 HLF morning show Beth Macy. She is a former reporter with the Roanoke Times and a best-selling author of such books as Factory Man and True Vine. She also has a current bestseller called Dopesick, Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Companies That Addicted America. The book tells the story of America's opioid epidemic and tells it through the eyes and experience of people in several communities across the Old Dominion. This book is currently a national bestseller. She'll be bringing it to the Prizery, and she will hold a discussion about the opioid crisis gripping our nation, our state, and our community this Monday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but first let me welcome to the 95.3 HLF Morning Show, Beth Macy. Beth, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Your first book, as we mentioned earlier, was about the furniture-making Bassett family. Second book was about brothers who were kidnapped and forced into a circus sideshow. What made you decide to tackle the opioid crisis in Dopesick?
I was a families beat reporter in Roanoke for, about the last decade that I was there. And one of the last big series I did was about heroin landing in an upper middle class neighborhood outside of Roanoke in Roanoke County called Hidden Valley, which was aptly named because of the stigma. People who did know about it hid it, and they were ashamed to talk about it. And so I did this 3-part series in 2012 about these two families whose lives had been upended by heroin. One, their son had overdosed and died, and the other, their son was about to go to prison for his role in selling the heroin that ended the other kid's life. And readers were really shocked when it ran for 3 days on the front page, and they're like, what? White, wealthy kids do heroin?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew. But this epidemic has actually been going on for quite a long time in another form.
Dopesick provides insight into the opioid crisis through your interviews and profiles of such individuals in some way that you've dealt with on a daily basis. Are there one or two people or one or two stories that stand out to you, Beth?
Yeah. So, like, the first doctor in the country who really kind of tried to sound the alarm about an upcoming epidemic was a country doctor in Lee County, which is our westernmost county in central Appalachia. His name is Art Van Zee. He works in a small sliding scale clinic out there. And shortly after the introduction of OxyContin in 1996, he started noticing patients coming in with real addiction problems. And he would be called out at night to overdoses in the hospital. Kids he had immunized as babies. People were ODing in the high school library. Farmers, miners, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s were succumbing to this drug. And so he called the company up right away, and he said, look, I know you say it's not addictive, but I've got, kids ODing in the high school library. My fear is that this is really going to be a big problem for the country, and that later you're going to look back and say, these are sentinel areas, these distressed communities with high overdoses are sentinel areas, the way New York and San Francisco were in the early years of HIV.
Let me ask you a question, stepping aside from our plan for a second here. Is there any one main culprit, or is there enough blame to spread around? I'm talking about doctors, I'm talking about pharmaceutical companies, and the individuals themselves. I mean, is there a person to blame? Are there persons to blame, or is it just like co-opt the blame?
I think it's really clear if you talk to public health experts. Had this drug not been introduced and marketed for 5 years as a non-addictive alternative to other lower dosage opioids that were already on the market, and really heavily marketed to doctors that this was a better drug, this was less addictive, et cetera, we would not be in the crisis that we're in. That's really clear.
So you're coming back to Big Pharma?
Yeah, I'm coming back to Purdue Pharma. In 2007, admitted to a felony charge of criminal misbranding in federal court in Abingdon.
Okay. Was it mentally, emotionally difficult to write this book?
Yes, it was. It really was. A friend told me early on, because he was worried about me, a writer friend said, you do really well when you're writing about heroes. The hero Factory Man was this kind of Faulknerian character who had sued China in a court of international trade. The hero of True Vine was this illiterate African-American maid in Jim Crow, Virginia, who had taken on big forces. And So the heroes in this book are people like Dr. Van Zee, but also, mothers who have lost kids who are now active trying to get people divert people from users from jail and into treatment, and, even some of the law enforcement that are working really hard, and the first responders. I've just watched people age like on fast forward writing this book, and I myself have probably aged on fast forward.
I got it. We're speaking this morning with Beth Macy. She's going to be in South Boston coming up on Monday, the 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Prizery. Her visit is sponsored by several organizations, including the Southern Virginia Higher Education Center, the South Boston Library, the Prizery, Centera Halifax Regional Hospital, among others. In promoting this book, doing such talks, meeting people, have you gained new insights into the opioid crisis you can share with us?
Well, I've been kind of all over the country, from New York and D.C. to smaller towns like Abingdon, and I'm in Painesville, Ohio right now. I'm getting ready to talk to a bunch of different Cleveland area librarians. I'm in a small town right now. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you go back to these distressed communities that have been dealing with it the worst, the response there is quite different than in the cities, where people are, mainly I get kind of, do-gooders, people coming out, well-read people want to discuss it almost like they would discuss a work of literary nonfiction. And but when you go to these communities where the problem is more apparent and more severe, they come up to you and they just tell you story after story, and they're like, it's maybe even worse than you described it. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the cities, they're still sort of surprised. They're still sort of insulated by their bubbles a bit.
Well, I guess my next obvious question is, how do you see America's opioid epidemic playing out? What do you see as an end result?
Yeah, well, it's just getting worse with no really signs for plateauing until sometime after 2020. But in the latest CDC overdose deaths, which came out a few weeks ago, there was a slight decrease in 3 New England states, and those are Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And what those 3 states are doing is basically what the rest of the country is going to have to do if we want to turn this around. They're offering access to medication-assisted treatment, which is the drug that prevents cravings and helps people get their lives back together. It's the number one tool for turning back the epidemic. And they are providing harm reduction services like fentanyl test strips and syringe exchanges. And these are kind of low-threshold barriers where users can go who are maybe living on the streets and don't have anywhere else to turn because they've worn their families out or their families can't support them, and they can go there and learn how to stay safe until they're ready for treatment, and then hopefully be funneled into treatment.
Dopesick, dealers, doctors, and the drug companies that addicted America. Beth Macy will be at the Southern Virginia Higher Education Center this Monday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. For more information, you can go online at svhec.org, click the Dopesick graphic. I didn't mention earlier, but attendance at her talk is free, but registration is encouraged. Beth, we certainly appreciate your time. Travel safe.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. Appreciate it. Always look forward to coming back to South Boston.